time now for our GMA Pride Month Spotlight, honoring LGBTQ+ stories and accomplishments all month long. This week, we are bringing it to the ballroom.
These 13 black superstars shocked the world with their talent, but kept one truth hidden till their final breath. From chart-topping singers to Oscar-nominated actors, they battled fame, fear, and a society that wouldn't let them be themselves. Here are the 13 black actors who hid that they were gay until the day they died. 1. Sammy Davis Jr.
Hi there, sailor. New in town? Hey.
Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the most famous entertainers of the 20th century. He could do it all: sing, dance, act, and make people laugh. He was part of the Rat Pack with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, and broke a lot of barriers for black performers in America. But while most people saw him as a flashy star with a big smile and smooth moves, some biographers and friends say there was a private side to Sammy's life that he kept hidden: his possible attraction to men. Sammy was married 3 times to women. One of his most well-known marriages was to Swedish actress May Britt in the 1960s. It caused a big scandal because interracial marriages were still controversial at the time. He also had a famous relationship with actress Kim Novak in the 1950s, but that relationship was shut down fast, reportedly by studio bosses and even the mob, because America wasn't ready to see a black man with a white woman on that level. Still, some people close to Sammy have said that those weren't his only relationships. A few biographies and Hollywood insiders have claimed that Sammy also had romantic or sexual relationships with men. He never confirmed it publicly, and there's no solid proof, but the rumors have been around for decades. People believe that he may have struggled with his sexuality, especially during a time when being gay could destroy your career, especially for a black man in the spotlight. Sammy Davis Jr. was also deeply connected to religion and identity. He converted to Judaism after surviving a terrible car accident in the 1950s. Some believe his faith gave him strength, while others say it added to the conflict he might have felt about his true identity, especially if he was struggling with his sexuality at the same time. He passed away in 1990 after a long and successful career. He left behind a legacy of breaking color barriers, standing up for civil rights, and being one of the most entertaining performers ever. 2. Little Richard.
Go ahead.
Let it all hang out with the beautiful Little Richard from down in Macon, Georgia. I am the king of rock and roll. Ow, ow, ow!
Little Richard was one of the most exciting and unforgettable stars in music history. With his wild outfits, loud voice, and crazy stage moves, he helped shape rock and roll. Songs like Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally, and Good Golly, Miss Molly made him a legend. But behind the fame and glitter, Little Richard had a personal struggle that followed him his whole life: his sexuality. From a young age, Little Richard was different. He was kicked out of his home by his father for being gay when he was just a teenager. That shows how hard things were for someone who didn't fit in with society's rules about how men should act. Even though he was hurt, Little Richard didn't let that stop him from chasing his dream. He hit the stage with sparkly clothes, makeup, and a voice that lit up the world. He was bold and flamboyant, and for many, he became a symbol of queerness before people even used that word out loud. But his relationship with his sexuality was not simple. Little Richard said different things about being gay throughout his life. Sometimes he said he had always been gay, and other times he rejected it because of his religious beliefs. In a 1982 interview, he said he had been gay all his life, but that God had shown him it was wrong. Later, in 1995, he said something very different, that he had been gay forever and believed God was full of love, not hate. Then, in 2012, he called himself omnisexual, which means he was attracted to people regardless of gender. He even said, "Sex to me is like a smorgasbord. Whatever I feel like, I go for." That shows how open-minded he could be when he allowed himself to be. The reason his views changed so much was because of his deep religious faith. Little Richard was raised in a Christian family and went back to church multiple times during his life. Every time he returned to religion, he would turn away from his sexuality again, thinking it was sinful. This constant back and forth made his life very confusing and painful. He wanted to be true to himself, but also wanted to be right with God. It was a battle between identity and faith, a struggle that many LGBTQ+ people still go through today. In 2020, Little Richard passed away at the age of 87. After his death, a new documentary called Little Richard, I Am Everything came out. It talks about his journey as a black, queer man trying to make it in the 1950s music world. 3. Donnie Hathaway.
So love me tonight.
Donnie Hathaway was one of the most talented soul singers of all time. His voice was rich, emotional, and full of pain and beauty. Songs like A Song for You, This Christmas, and his duets with Roberta Flack made him a star. But behind all the success, Donnie was struggling, not just with mental health, but also with a side of himself that he may have felt he had to hide. Some reports and later stories suggest that Donnie Hathaway might have been gay or bisexual, though he never spoke about it publicly. Donnie was married to a woman named Eulola Hathaway, and they had 2 daughters, Lala Hathaway, who is now a famous singer herself, and Kenya. From the outside, he seemed like a family man, but according to some reports, including an article in Magnet magazine, Donnie may have also lived a closeted gay life. That means he might have been attracted to men, but felt he couldn't come out because of fear, shame, or the world he lived in. Back in the 1970s, being openly gay, especially as a black male artist in the music industry, was incredibly difficult. There was a lot of judgment and homophobia, both in society and in the music world. For someone like Donnie, who was also dealing with serious mental health issues, it might have felt impossible to share that part of himself. Donnie was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, a mental illness that causes hallucinations, extreme mood swings, and deep paranoia. He was in and out of hospitals and often felt like people were out to harm him. If he was also hiding his sexuality on top of all that, it must have been a heavy weight to carry. Some people who knew him said he was deeply troubled and burdened by secrets, and that included possibly being gay in a world that didn't accept it. A stage show called The Donnie Hathaway Story explores his life, including his friendship with Roberta Flack, and hints at his possible queer identity. The play doesn't make his sexuality the main focus, but it doesn't ignore it either. It shows how complex and layered Donnie really was. Brilliant, loving, but also broken and confused at times. 4. Luther Vandross.
And them saying, ladies and gentlemen, to host the 2nd annual Soul Train Music Awards, Dionne Warwick and Luther Vandross.
Behind all the fame, there was a part of his life that he kept very private, his sexuality. Luther never came out as gay while he was alive, even though many people wondered about it for years. People close to Luther say he was gay, but he didn't feel comfortable telling the world. One of his closest friends, singer Patti LaBelle, said in a 2017 interview that Luther was indeed gay, but he didn't come out because he was afraid of how it would affect his career. She explained that Luther was worried about how his fans would react, especially the female fans who loved him so much. He also didn't want to upset his mother, who meant everything to him. Patti said that Luther wanted to keep his mother proud and didn't want her to deal with the hate or judgment that might come if he came out. Throughout his career, there were rumors about his sexuality, but Luther always kept quiet. Some fans said they could tell from his soft-spoken nature or the way he dressed, but that was just guesswork. Luther wanted people to focus on his music, not his personal life. And honestly, he had every right to make that choice. After Luther died in 2005 from a stroke, more people started to talk about this part of his life. Some of his close friends confirmed that he had been gay, but they also said he was a very private person who didn't want the media digging into his relationships. Even in death, some fans were divided. Some felt that talking about his sexuality after he passed was disrespectful. Others thought it helped people understand him better and gave comfort to LGBTQ+ fans who looked up to him. In early 2025, a documentary called Luther, Never Too Much was released. It looked into his life and legacy, including his music, fame, and the personal struggles he never shared. The film touched on his sexuality, but it was done in a respectful way. It didn't try to force anything or make headlines. Instead, it honored his choice to stay private during his life while still giving people a fuller picture of who he was. 5. Germaine Stewart.
When I first moved to London, when I used to sing back up with Shalimar, I met Culture Club, and Culture Club took me in the studio to record.
Germaine had a bright energy, a unique style, and a voice that stood out in the music scene. But behind the lights and fame, there was a deeper story, one about being a proud, gay black man in an industry that wasn't always accepting. Germaine Stewart was gay, and even though he didn't go around publicly shouting it from the rooftops, he didn't exactly hide it either. In fact, during the 1980s, when being openly gay was still very risky, especially for black artists, Germaine still chose to live his truth in his own quiet way. People in the music world and those close to him knew about his sexuality, but it wasn't something that got a lot of media attention back then. He didn't fit the usual mold of a macho pop star, and that made him stand out. But sadly, that also made some people in the music business unsure about supporting him fully. In interviews, Germaine often avoided talking about his personal life directly. But if you really looked at his image, style, and lyrics, you could tell he was expressing himself freely. His fashion was bold, colorful, and feminine, and he never tried to change who he was just to make others more comfortable. That kind of confidence was rare and brave, especially back in those days. Being openly gay in the 1980s music scene was risky. People feared losing fans or getting blacklisted by labels. But Germaine didn't let that stop him from doing what he loved. Unfortunately, Germaine's life was cut short. He died in 1997 at just 39 years old from AIDS-related liver cancer. It was a painful reminder of how many artists in that era were lost to the AIDS crisis. Back then, talking about AIDS was taboo, and many gay men were judged harshly for getting sick. Germaine's death was not widely reported in the media, and he quietly faded out of the spotlight. But those who knew him say he was full of love, joy, and spirit until the very end. 6. Ethel Waters.
Petunia! Is this really you?
But not the same me who used to break her back busting suds over a tub for you.
Ethel Waters was one of the biggest stars in early black entertainment. She was a powerful singer, an amazing actress, and someone who broke a lot of barriers for black performers in the 1900s. But there's a part of her life that most people didn't know much about: her sexuality. Ethel Waters never publicly said she was gay or bisexual, but many people close to her and some history experts believe she had same-sex relationships, especially early in her career. In the 1920s, Ethel had a very close relationship with a woman named Ethel Williams. Williams was a dancer, and the two women lived together for some time. People around them even called them the two Ethels, like they were a couple. This was way before it was considered okay to be openly gay or bisexual, especially if you were a public figure. Ethel Waters also married men 3 times in her life, which is why some say she may have been bisexual. But none of her marriages lasted, and it's clear that her connection with Ethel Williams was something special. Even though she never said out loud that she was part of the LQB+ community, the clues were there. Ethel Waters was known to keep her personal life very private, probably because it was too risky to be open about her sexuality back then. If people had known, she could have lost her career, her reputation, and maybe even her safety. Being a black woman in entertainment already came with so many struggles. Adding something as controversial as being openly queer would have made things even harder for her. Later in life, Ethel Waters became deeply religious. In the 1950s and 1960s, she even toured with the famous preacher Billy Graham. She sang gospel music and shared her testimony about finding God. Because of this religious phase, she never talked about her past relationships with women again. Some people think she tried to forget or hide that part of her life, maybe out of guilt or pressure from religious beliefs. Still, Ethel Waters had a strong fan base within the gay and lesbian community. One of her biggest fans was a man named Carl Van Vechten, a famous photographer and writer. He was gay and took many beautiful portraits of Ethel, showing her strength and beauty. That was bold for her time, but this next legend hid his truth, even in his final breath. And his story will hit you hard. 7. Alvin Ay.
And 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1.
Alvin Ay was one of the most famous dancers and choreographers in American history. He started the Alvin Ay American Dance Theater, AAADT, which became a global symbol of black excellence in dance. His shows were emotional, powerful, and always full of life. But while his art spoke loudly, Alvin Ay himself stayed very quiet about one big part of his life. He was gay. Alvin Ay lived at a time when being openly gay was dangerous, especially for black men. If you were gay, you could lose your job, be treated badly, or even be attacked. Because of this, Ay kept his sexuality private. He never came out publicly. But people who knew him personally, as well as later biographies and articles, confirmed that Alvin Ay was gay. Even though he didn't talk about it, his work often showed signs of what he was feeling inside. He used dance to express things he couldn't say out loud. In some of his choreography, you can see themes like love between two men, pain, and even religious struggle. He would often include same-sex dance partnerships and mix them with symbols of masculinity and church life. This was his way of sharing his feelings without using words. It was like he poured his hidden self into his art. Ay also struggled with mental health. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which made life even more challenging. He faced pressure from all sides, being a black man in a white-dominated dance world, being gay in a homophobic society, and dealing with mental health issues that weren't openly talked about back then. It's no surprise he stayed private. In 1989, Alvin Ay died from AIDS-related complications. But even then, he asked his doctor to say he died from a blood disease. That's how scared people were of the stigma around AIDS and homosexuality. Ay didn't want the truth to overshadow his legacy or cause pain to his loved ones. It's heartbreaking that someone so talented still felt he had to hide who he really was, even in death. 8. Paul Winfield.
It only takes one man to wash you away, and he is the last man in this world I want looking for me.
Paul Winfield was a super talented actor who made history in Hollywood. He was the first black man to be nominated for an Oscar for a leading role in the movie Sounder, 1972. He also did great work on TV and stage, earning tons of respect in the acting world. But one thing most people didn't know about him, at least while he was alive, was that he was gay. Paul never came out publicly during his life. He wasn't loud about his personal life, but close friends and people who worked with him knew the truth. He was in a long-term relationship with an architect named Charles Gillen Jr. They were together for almost 30 years, which is amazing in any relationship, especially one that had to stay private for so long. Back then, being openly gay, especially for a black man in Hollywood, could destroy your career. People could lose roles, fans, or even be kicked out of the industry. That's probably why Paul and Charles kept things quiet. But even though they didn't talk much about their love, it was real and strong. When Charles passed away in 2002, Paul was heartbroken. 2 years later, in 2004, Paul died of a heart attack. The two are now buried next to each other at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Los Angeles, a final sign of how much they meant to each other. There's an interesting story about Paul's earlier life, too. In the early 1970s, around the time he was working on Sounder, Paul lived with his co-star Cicely Tyson for about a year and a half. People thought they were dating, but that wasn't the case. Later on, it came out that Paul had actually told Cicely he was gay during filming. She offered him a safe place to stay so he wouldn't have to deal with gossip, pressure, or hate. That shows how close they were as friends and how much support Paul needed at that time. After Paul died, more people started talking openly about his sexuality and his long relationship with Charles. A lot of fans were surprised, but also proud of him. Even though he never announced it to the world, he lived a full life and had someone who truly loved him. 9. Richard Bruce Nugent.
Makes no difference if it's sweet or hot. Just give that rhythm every little thing you've got.
Richard Bruce Nugent was one of the boldest artists of the Harlem Renaissance. He was a writer, painter, poet, and actor who didn't just create amazing work, he also lived proudly as a gay black man at a time when almost no one else did. While many people in his world stayed silent about their sexuality, Richard didn't hide who he was. That made him brave, especially in the 1920s and 1930s, when being openly gay could destroy your reputation or even your safety. Nugent was born in 1906 and became part of a powerful group of black writers and artists during the Harlem Renaissance, like Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston. But unlike many of them, Nugent was openly gay in his personal life and didn't try to fit into society's rules. He was known for his stylish clothes, bohemian attitude, and not caring what others thought. His confidence made him stand out in every room. One of the most important things he ever wrote was a short story called Smoke, Lilies, and Jade, published in 1926. It was one of the first stories by a black author to talk openly about same-sex love. The story was about a young man who has a romantic and emotional relationship with another man named Beauty. The writing style was dreamy and poetic, and it talked about desire in a way that was gentle but also clear. It shocked a lot of people at the time because it was so different and so honest. In a 1983 interview, Nugent said something powerful about that story. "I intended it to be a soul-searching poem of another kind of lonesomeness, not the lonesomeness of being racially stigmatized, but otherwise stigmatized. You see, I am a homosexual." That quote says a lot. Nugent wasn't just talking about being black in a racist world. He was also talking about the pain of being judged for who you love. He knew what it felt like to be treated like an outsider in more than one way. Because he was so open about being gay, Nugent didn't get as many opportunities as other artists of his time. Some publishers didn't want to work with him, and a lot of people just ignored his work. But he didn't stop. He kept writing, painting, and being himself. He lived his truth when almost everyone else had to hide theirs. 10th Bayard Rustin.
That we have effective civil rights legislation, no compromise, no filibuster.
Rustin was born in 1912 and grew up believing in equality and fairness. He fought for many causes like civil rights, peace, socialism, and nonviolence. He helped organize some of the biggest protests in American history, like the famous 1963 March on Washington, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. Rustin was the one who helped plan and organize that entire march, but he didn't get much credit because other leaders were worried about how the public would react to a gay man being in the spotlight. Even though Rustin was openly gay in his personal life, the times were harsh. Being gay in the 1950s and 60s was seen as shameful or even illegal in many places. Because of this, he was often treated unfairly, even by people he worked with in the movement. Some of his fellow activists tried to push him out or used his sexuality against him. He even got arrested at times, not for protests, but just for being gay. But Rustin never gave up. He kept fighting for justice for everyone, not just for Black Americans, but for poor people, workers, and the LGBTQ+ community too. In the last years of his life, he became more vocal about gay rights. He gave speeches and wrote essays saying that gay people deserve the same freedoms and respect as anyone else. He believed that if you were fighting for justice, you had to fight for it for everyone. Rustin also had a loving relationship with a man named Walter Nagel. Since same-sex marriage wasn't legal at that time, Rustin found a unique way to protect their relationship. In 1982, he legally adopted Walter, like how someone might adopt a child, so they could have legal rights as a couple. It might sound strange now, but back then, it was one of the only ways for gay couples to protect each other under the law. Bayard Rustin passed away in 1987, but his story didn't end there. In 2013, President Barack Obama gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest award a U.S. citizen can get. It was a big deal, not just for Rustin's legacy, but for the LGBTQ+ community and civil rights history. 11. James Baldwin.
Most of the white Americans I've ever encountered, really, had a Negro friend or a Negro maid or somebody in high school, but they never.
James Baldwin was one of the most powerful writers of the 20th century. He was a black man, an activist, and yes, he was openly gay. Baldwin wrote novels, essays, and plays that talked about race, class, and sexuality in a way no one else was doing at the time. He didn't just write stories, he told the truth, even when it made people uncomfortable. Baldwin didn't hide his sexuality. He talked about being attracted to men, and his books often included gay characters or same-sex love stories. But he didn't like being boxed in by labels like gay or homosexual. In his mind, love was love. He once said that putting people into categories was limiting and that he just wanted to write about real human emotions. Baldwin believed that who you loved didn't change your worth or your identity. One of his most famous books is Giovanni's Room, written in 1956. The main character is a man who falls in love with another man in Paris. At the time, this was a huge deal. It was risky for a black man in America to write a story like that, especially during a time when being gay was seen as shameful or even illegal. But Baldwin didn't care. He wanted to tell the truth. He said that not writing that book would have been dishonest. And even though it made some publishers nervous, it became one of his most powerful works. Later, in Just Above My Head, Baldwin wrote more about same-sex relationships, especially between black men. His characters had real feelings, deep love, heartbreak, and hope. He didn't make their sexuality the problem of the story. He showed them as full, complex human beings. Even though Baldwin was open in his writing, he was very private about his personal life. He didn't share much about who he dated or loved. A lot of what we know about his romantic life comes from biographies written after he died. What's clear is that Baldwin did have relationships with men, both in the U.S. and while living abroad in France and Turkey. But he kept those moments mostly for himself. In a 1984 interview, Baldwin said something really deep. His identity as a black gay man gave him an outsider view of the world. He believed this helped him see things others couldn't. He used that perspective to call out injustice, speak the truth, and connect with people who also felt misunderstood or left out. James Baldwin died in 1987, but his legacy lives on. His honesty gave strength to other queer black writers who came after him. He helped people see that love is complex, that identity can't be put in a box, and that being different doesn't make you wrong. 12. Willie Ninja.
I'm Willie Ninja, the mother of the House of Ninja.
Willie Ninja was a legend in the LGBTQ+ world and a true pioneer in dance. He wasn't just a performer, he was a voice, a role model, and a leader in the underground ballroom scene of New York City. Most people know him from the documentary Paris is Burning, 1990, which showed the world what ballroom culture really looked like. Willie Ninja stood out in that film because of his incredible dance skills and powerful presence. He was proudly gay and used his talents to uplift the LGBTQ+ community, especially black and Latino queer people who didn't always have a voice. Willie was known as the godfather of voguing. Voguing is a dance style that involves sharp poses, smooth movements, and sometimes dramatic spins or drops. It was inspired by fashion magazines like Vogue, where models would strike fierce poses. Willie didn't invent voguing, but he perfected it and helped turn it into an art form. He trained younger dancers, mentored new performers, and helped bring ballroom culture out of the shadows. Even though Willie was openly gay and proud in the ballroom scene, he had to be more careful in the outside world. Mainstream society still wasn't very accepting of gay people, especially back in the 80s and 90s. Being a gay black man who expressed himself through feminine dance made him a target for judgment. But Willie didn't let fear stop him. He stayed true to himself and kept dancing, teaching, and inspiring. Outside of the clubs, Willie made moves in the fashion world too. He modeled, walked runways, and even coached models for big designers like Jean-Paul Gaultier and Thierry Mugler. He brought voguing to the big stage way before it became popular through Madonna's song, Vogue. But unlike Madonna, Willie and his community created this dance as a form of expression, survival, and pride. Another important part of Willie's story is how he raised awareness about HIV and AIDS. At a time when many people were scared to even talk about the disease, Willie used ballroom events to spread the message. He encouraged people to get tested, be safe, and look out for one another. He knew the community was hurting, and he wanted to make a difference. Sadly, Willie Ninja died in 2006 at just 45 years old from heart failure related to AIDS. His death was a huge loss for the LGBTQ+ world and for dance culture as a whole. 13. Howard Rollins.
You put such a rage in my heart. Tell me what to do now.
Howard Rollins was a brilliant actor who starred in big roles during the 1980s and 90s. Most people know him from Ragtime and the TV series In the Heat of the Night. He played strong, serious characters and was known for his amazing acting skills. But behind the camera, Howard had a secret he couldn't share with the world. He was gay. Back then, Hollywood made it really hard for actors to be open about their sexuality. If you were a man playing romantic or tough guy roles, people expected you to be straight in real life too. If a male actor came out as gay, there was a big risk that he would stop getting parts. That pressure was even worse for black actors like Howard, who already faced fewer opportunities because of racism. So even though Howard was gay, he never talked about it in public. People who knew Howard personally say he was a kind, private man. He didn't do big interviews about his love life or relationships. But in private, he was seen visiting gay clubs and spending time with other gay actors like Raymond Sant, Jacques, and Paul Winfield. These were safe spaces for him, places where he could be himself without judgment. Even though he had talent and success, Howard's life wasn't easy. The pressure of hiding who he was, plus the stress of working in Hollywood, took a toll on him. He struggled with addiction to drugs and alcohol. His addiction became so serious that he was written off in the heat of the night. That moment really hurt his career, and things never fully recovered. In the mid-1990s, Howard was diagnosed with AIDS-related lymphoma. Like many gay men of that era, he didn't talk publicly about his illness. AIDS was highly stigmatized at the time, and many people with it were treated badly. He passed away in 1996 at just 46 years old. After his death, more people started to speak honestly about who he was, including the fact that he was gay. But sadly, Howard never got to live openly in a world that could have accepted him for everything he was. Which of these stories surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments. And if you learned something new today or felt inspired, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter.